Hello, everyone. Given this presentation is being recorded for this conference and for posterity, I've included my email address on this slide and the last. So if you have any questions, then please drop me an email and I'll do my utmost to respond to your questions in good time, or at least within reasonable time. Okay, so onward then. So as a preface to today's talk, I would like to express my profound gratitude to Janaki Nair for organizing this conference, but above all for providing a golden opportunity for those of us studying the niche field of tantric rituals. In doing so, she has prepared a forum within which we can share our respective research angles, and chiefly in my case, this occurs following a somewhat protracted hiatus of being off the academic radar, which at present is nearing on a decade. My sincerest hope is that, at the very least, I can do justice to this material, deferred it has been until now, and say something even vaguely coherent about Śākta Tantric texts and rituals, both of which constitute this conference's main theme in its broadest sense. In that vein, this lecture will zero in on two specific case studies in South Asia, namely Navadurgā in Bhaktapur, Nepal, and Teyyāṭṭam in northern Kerala, which together form my core data set, each based on fieldwork conducted in these locales between 2014 and 2015. In a nutshell, within these ritual traditions, subaltern dancer mediums perform as members of a goddess family consisting of Bhairava, Ganesha, and the goddesses, in an effort to revive ties of ritual kinship and harness a terrestrial power, Shakti, that once typified a former kingdom. Staying true to the comparative method to which I subscribe, I shall alternate between both case studies throughout, giving no preference to one above the other. As Alexis Sanderson tells us, northern and southern regions of the subcontinent, Bhaktapur and Kerala included, were part of, I quote, a more widespread system, end quote, during the early medieval period, an epoch he calls the Shaiva Age, where new sovereign states established following the demise of Gupta imperialism began absorbing Shikha Shaiva traditions into their locality's royal religion, henceforth I call tantric culture. By worshipping ferocious divinities ordered as the goddess clan, the aim of tantric culture in these smaller kingdoms was to manipulate the material world for defensive purposes, creating a strategic bulwark against potential invasion by other neighboring realms. Navadurgā and Teyyāṭṭam were, at least in part, impelled by these broader sociocultural changes, though they occurred much earlier chronologically, but whose appeal had knock-on effects for later generations in shaping these performative traditions, which were formed from a pastiche of disparate influences, both local and translocal. It is fair to say, then, that both case studies are, in a word, culturally distinctive variations on a common typology, by which I mean vernacular variants of a particular worldview I call Folk Śākta Tantric. In keeping with Deleuze and Guattari's notion of a rhizome, these two case studies, like text and ritual, are as such, separate entities interconnected in a non-hierarchical rhizomic assemblage, or, to use Levi-Strauss's term, a bricolage. Hence, in positing this position, I seek to circumvent a tautological conflation of techne and gnosis, or for our purposes, ritual performances and printed texts, with text here referring to a multiplicity of literatures that have inspired these ritual traditions to whichever degree, from vernacular almanacs to tantric paddhatis here meaning ritual manuals. This ritual text dichotomy is an age-old debate in religious studies, where discussions surrounding the primacy of written knowledge systems, specifically in the academy, are well documented. In response, semiotic critiques emerged, with the writings of J.L. Austin and his theory of speech acts being particularly influential in that respect. As an alternative in our context, however, I suggest that the dancer medium's body, through ritual performance, melds both the textual gnoseological and performative at a single stroke, and in the process transforms a medieval text into a reconfigured somatic one. For the most part, printed compendia are absent in ritual performance, or stored away as heirlooms, and are resultantly hidden in plain sight. In other words, the dancer mediums have simultaneously subsumed and superseded the text. By such means, dancer mediums have acquired the status of somatic textuality, thereby standing in for the erstwhile power of written sources, sundry and distributed in a bricolage web of ritual knowledge, as I call it, much like the menstrual synchrony of the goddess family on which it is based, which amically aligns with Tantra's emphasis on bodily experiences. Just as Matt Tomlinson, in his book Ritual Textuality, advocates the metaphor, specifically motion, to capture the dovetailing of ritual performance and textuality, I follow suit and advance my own, a bricolage web, as a way of emphasizing how ritual knowledge in folk Śākta performance is a veritable constellation composed of distinct but overlapping sources, oral and literary. How it comes to pass that a bricolage web of ritual knowledge becomes thematic and ritual can be explicated as follows. Every dancer medium embodies a member of a goddess family, who is made manifest in him via three discrete but intertwined performative elements, each imbued with cultural significance, that play out in ritual performances and ultimately give bodily form to, and thus reshape, textual knowledge. These three constituents are: 1. Somatic, i.e. expressed through mudras and adorned on mediums' bodies as symbols, be those on god masks, headdresses, face paints, and so forth, as it is simply encapsulated in the Malayalam term mukamerulta, meaning face writing. 2. Verbal epistemic, i.e. uttered as mantras or songs that invoke the deities in question. And 3. Spatial, i.e. geometrically depicted as a mandala, representing either A, the performative space, often described in metaphorical terms as wind in a courtyard, sometimes labeled prana, life breath, or B, the ancestral territory where a performance takes place, which was, in the medieval period, part of a petty kingdom whose Shakti or material energy the mediums resurrect in performance. Ascribed to each component of this triad is a spatial bodily technique, viz. Mudra, mantra, and mandala, each partly grounded in literary sources, whose enactment is predicated upon the organic, intuitive prowess of the medium, which in turn brings this bricolage web of ritual knowledge into being. The medium's propensity to retrieve and later convey textuality through their ritualized body is a power they cultivate through years of tutelage and training, which may involve, for instance, reading vernacular manuscripts, though not in situ, that is to say, during ritual performance, but in advance thereof, memorizing mantra songs, and some improvisation. All of this is overseen by a guru, senior medium within a lineage, who was delegated the task of priming dancer mediums to become somatic texts. In setting forth my argument, I have sought to avoid committing a post hoc fallacy by suggesting a corpus of texts were antecedent to ritual performance and thereby causally produced it, but rather I advanced the proposition that both were mutually exclusive, yet symbiotically dependent and diachronic phenomena, adapting vis-a-vis one another with the passage of time. Before proceeding into the case studies, however, let us return to the quotation featured in this lecture's title. From where does it originate? And reference here is the title. Enter Ujesh Banmala, a member of the Banmala family, Bhaktapur's dancer medium clan, and my closest interlocutor. It was he who uttered this thought-provoking phrase. One morning on our way to Kamal Binayak, a neighborhood in Bhaktapur, Ujesh and I were ambling along one of the city's narrow alleyways when, out of the blue, we happened upon his family healer, a Boide, who lived nearby. Following a brief exchange, Ujesh started to regale, as he often did, informative account of how the Boide, like all sacerdotal persons in Newar culture, is a keeper of ritual manuscripts in Sanskrit and in the vernacular, Newari, and how in bygone days they played a liturgical function in guiding priests through the intricate process of enacting pujas and rites, where animal sacrifice was and is the norm. It is for this reason that several palm leaf manuscripts, now largely obsolete in ritual performances today, are splattered with dried-on droplets of blood, something which is rather common. On the face of it, this narrative seems to substantiate what we already know about the historical use of manuals in tantric ritual. From Whitney Cox, we know that South Indian religious culture in the medieval age was literary to the core. And for Bihani Sharkar, medieval epigraphic evidence from Southeast Asia confirms the importance of paddhatis in directing religious rites of the period. Contrary to expectations, however, Ujesh always discouraged me from seeking out ritual manuals for my own perusal. For the uninitiated, according to Ujesh, reading paddhatis can precipitate some detrimental effect on the reader's sanity. Certainly, tantric texts served in the past as formidable blueprints for tantra mantra, and whose mere presence in ritual spaces had an overwhelmingly palpable potency. In line with this logic, the Banmala's almanac, known colloquially as Vamsavali, literally chronicles, is stored out of sight and consulted only when needed. Typically, the almanac is opened only at the autumnal equinox, when the Nayo, male elder, in accordance with astronomical factors and his own powers of intuition, referred to here or in Newari as, or in Nepali as Bhagavan Vikrama, literally God within, delegates which medium will perform as whichever deity that year. The roles change annually, whereupon he jots down these details into the almanac's record. Here, an already existent corpus is appended with information elicited from a subjective sense of perception. And it is this custom, along with improvisation, which renders the texts of Folk Śākta Tantric both as somatic and diachronic. What is more, the ceremonial clothing, which are called jama, garbing the medium's bodies, are themselves embroidered with symbols, crescent moons, and a pentad of colours associated with physical space. A sort of language in and of itself which affords symbolic power a la Bourdieu to the mediums, lending credence to their cultural capital, standing for the authority of text. As Robert Levy notes in multiple points in Mesocosm, the city sets the stage for a perpetual dance of symbols, interweaving and bringing to life innumerable text-based stories and cosmological dramas, including Bhairava's tale in the Shiva Purana, Durga's mythological battle in the Markandeya Purana, and local Newari logics pertaining to apotropaic protection and the Nagas, living beings, and fusing all of this into this bricolage into a uniquely somatic text via ritual performance. As for Teyyāṭṭam in northern Kerala, their dancer medium, which is called Kolakaran, sometimes Deyakaran, to have their own set of local manuals and parochial renditions of Śākta Tantric tenets and myths, which are brought to bear on their collective performances. Exclusively in Kerala, they have produced their own codices for the purposes of constructing temples, installing deities therein, and warding off spirit beings, adrisya murtikal. These texts are the Tantra Samutaya and the Sesa Samutaya, much of whose content finds its provenance in the Brahmayamala, a Kashmiri Bhairava Tantric text centered on the yoginis and goddesses from approximately the 7th, 8th centuries Common Era that may have influenced Tantric religion, both in Bhaktapur and Kerala, or at least one of the key texts that influenced religion in both regions. As with the Banmala's almanac, these texts are significant only sporadically and are used as a crutch for priests while performing their temple liturgies. Based on my own experiences working with Teyyāṭṭam dancer mediums, they seem to valorize innate ability above that which is mandated in the official text, which they regarded as merely idealized and never truly indicative of the gritty realities of being a dancer medium and all that entails. Things go wrong in ritual performance, as I've realized, and an important part of being a medium is the capacity to improvise. That tendency to ad-lib is, of course, what imparts Shakti, their cultural capital, as I mentioned earlier on. To give an example, in Kannur one day, I was observing a session during which Teyyāṭṭam mediums were training. At one point, a young dancer medium asked his guru, named Akash, for some guidance, inquiring about the right way to perform a specific dance. As is conventional among dancer mediums, he retorted a terse and wise remark. These days, young people ask too many questions. Is this correct? Why this way? Should I move in this way? The only way you will know anything is if you do, end quote. That is not to say, however, that the songs sung by dancer mediums used to invoke their deities were rattled off on the spot. Many such songs, also called totem, were written on palm leaf manuscripts, bequeathed in dancer medium lineages as heirlooms, and commended to memory by mediums in preparation of their ritual dances, but rarely were they ever adhered to word for word. On that premise, textual manuals serve merely as aid memoir for dancer mediums. Their performance as ritualists is as much contingent on whim and capability, inculcated through coaching provided within the lineage, as sticking rigidly to the script. As I've argued thus far, in ritual performance, dancer mediums intercalate three elements: one, somatic; two, verbal epistemic; and three, spatial. In Teyyāṭṭam's context, these three elements can be articulated like so: one, prana, or 5 breaths of the subtle body, and also the chakras, also a pentat; two, mantramurti, or the 5 deities associated with mantravadam, sorcery; and 3, bhutam, the 5 aspects of physical space. This characteristically tantric blending of the discursive and somatic is mapped onto the body of the dancer medium, which is conveyed in local parlance as mukamerulta and uranyaka, which both translate respectively as fish writing and to join. Crucially, these terms seem to hint at a process akin to writing, but this is not writing as is conventionally understood. Somatic textuality is not necessarily inscribing a tabula rasa with textual knowledge per se, a separate entity altogether. Instead, somatic textuality is highlighting with symbolic signifiers what is already within. That is, the power of Shakti, or what could be interpreted here as the dancer medium's inbuilt powers of intuition. To put it another way, the ritual performers have become learned in their ritual traditions, read excerpts from various manuscripts preserved in their family collections, and from one performance to the next, they continually adapt to the ever-changing circumstances that face them. Each one poses different challenges for the mediums, instructions for which cannot be found in any written source. Conclusion. In honor of Akash's laconic counsel, I shall keep my conclusion brief with a theoretical reflection, whilst at the same time echoing a now famous and long-standing dictum shared among anthropologists. I quote, "Myth is to ritual as music is to dance," end quote. Be that as it may, in our dancer medium's case, I argue that their ritual performance is a corollary to that of traditional jazz. The musicians own the stage, have completely disregarded the score, read the textual materials, or added their own amendments and annotations to the original, have memorized the tune and interspersed their melody with segments of improvisation. Simply put, it is the instruments, the players, their bodies, and the ambience which together make the music. They're not the score alone. Thank you.